Salute. Welcome to The Real Buzz. I'm CT from the streets of buzzing. I'm my partner in crime, Divine, Knicks Real Talk. We're joined by a very special guest. He needs no introduction. He's the New York Post, all things New York Knicks. Appreciate you, Marc, for coming through.
Oh, thanks for having me, CT, Divine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's an honor. I've been following you since I've been a Knicks. I've been a Knicks fan for 50 years, man. So I know you've been out here on your grind covering the Knicks, man. And I know it's got to be a pretty wonderful job to be able to do that. To be able to cover a team so wrapped in the history and the franchise itself. So it really got to be amazing to be a beat writer for the New York Knicks to cover one of the biggest fan bases in the world, man. So I got to be a beautiful job to have, being a beat writer for the Post to cover the Knicks and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's only 22 seasons, not as many as you may have thought, but I will say that the fan base is unbelievable. And we're really experiencing it on the road. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic or maybe just because the team is not terrible anymore, but every arena, even in San Antonio, I was surprised how many Knicks jerseys there were. I mean, it wasn't like a loud crowd for the Knicks the other night, but there were so many Knicks jerseys. I mean, I saw someone wearing a Derrick Rose Simeon High School jersey, and everywhere we go, I mean, obviously there's places like Orlando and Charlotte and Atlanta where it's always been a big Knicks fan base in those arenas. But I've seen it in other spots, like even Milwaukee, where there's just more Knicks jerseys than usual. And maybe it's not a pandemic thing where just all Knicks fans are excited to get out of the house, but maybe it's just because they're finally not terrible. Even though on Twitter you'd think they are terrible if you go on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you raise a great point. You know, with the biggest fan base, there's always the spotlight, and that. So obviously the last couple of seasons, Marc, were very challenging for everybody. You guys had to conduct your work on over Zoom, things like that. Now that you can finally be in the building and use your beat writer intuition, see body language, see behavioral things. What has that been like? From the last few years to now, you can finally travel.
Yeah, well, I will say it's really not back to 100% normal, unfortunately. We're not in the locker room. There are players that we'd like to talk to that the Knicks have the decision-making ability on who we talk to. So we could ask for Kevin Knox to see where his mind is and take his temperature. We haven't talked to Kevin Knox since the preseason. Miles McBride, we'd like to talk to him. If this was normal days when he came back from the Westchester Knicks, we would go up to his locker and ask him, about the G League experience and how he's adjusting to not playing pretty much. So it's not back to 100%, but we are in person. Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly, I mean, they knew my face on like Zoom, but I didn't meet them officially and stand next to them until the Las Vegas Summer League in August. And like they kind of knew me just from my voice and seeing my little box on Zoom, but it was just fun to be around them. And you really got a sense how both those guys, they come across good on TV and everything, but they're really nice guys. So it was a thrill to finally meet some of those guys. Alec Burks, who's a quiet kid, but we finally got to meet him since last season was all Zoom. But yeah, it's better. We're back on the road. I started traveling late last season, naturally in the playoffs, but now it's full blown travel. And I just wish they would open up the locker rooms to us. But the new variant and all, I just don't see that happening this season.
Is it more just about really just the post game interviews for you guys? Once the game is over, you go do your post game interviews, and that's about it for you, or you get to interact with them other than the post game?
Yeah, well, on the road is good because we get to go to the morning shoot arounds, so we get a couple of players there, and that's informal. We just talk to them without a dais or whatever. But other than the morning shoot around, then it's at post game at the formality of being on Zoom. Also, they're telecasting it on Zoom. Naturally, MSG Network has their camera, so it's more formal. So that's where we stand now. But It's 100% better. Well, I wouldn't say 100%, but it's 75% better than last season when it was Zoom all the time and we weren't really traveling. But, we bump into them in the hallways of the arena. And if we stay at their hotel, once in a while, they'll stay at a Marriott property where all the writers, of course, stay at it. We're Marriott people. So, we bump into them at that point. But Leon Rose still stays his distance. Before games were allowed onto the court. Last season, we were up on the bridge, the Chase Bridge, so we couldn't really, rub shoulders with Leon Rose, but he's staying his distance. He does not really come near us when we're on the court before a game.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously being in the arena, fans are now allowed, to everyone's benefit. Divine was there opening night, and just being able to see the bench and the way, the players behave and react to certain things is good insight as well.
Yeah. Well, we were at the home games last season, but again, on the bridge, I brought binoculars. I bought a pair of great used binoculars early last season. And one story that I broke because I had my binoculars was that Austin Rivers wasn't on the bench for one of the games after he got taken out of the rotation. And I asked the Knicks about it. I wouldn't have been able to know that. If I didn't have my binos, I would not have been able to tell Austin wasn't on the bench. So I asked the Knicks, and they claimed he was getting treatment for his ankle during that game, but I still don't believe that. Soon after, he was unloaded or waived. I can't even remember how they departed with him. I don't even know if it was a trade. I think they just waived him, and Denver picked him up. So, so to see the bench reaction, and last season, it was great to, even up on the bridge, you could see Theo Pinson, going crazy on the bench. And this season, they don't have that. And Theo Pinson recently tweeted, in fact, yesterday may have been a tweet about Obi Toppin's dunk, saying if I was on the bench, I would have, exploded or whatever his terminology was. But they actually miss him. I'm surprised they didn't bring him back. Wayne Selden is not going to play. I mean, he's a nice bench cheerleader. He's up on his feet cheering, but Theo Pinson took it to a new level. And it's great, Divine, that you went to opening night, because that probably was the season's highlight as we speak. That night was amazing. As loud as a playoff game, any playoff game at the Garden I've seen, double overtime, a victory, still stands as my highlight and many fans' highlight of the season.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. It was beautiful to be there, man. It was awesome, and the experience was real wonderful. And I would, for me to come from North Carolina to get all the way to New York to go there and be in the Garden with all the fans, and it was just really spectacular, man. It's something that's gonna last forever for me. You know what I mean? And and it was a real thing. Hey, let me ask you a question. Like, for the current Knicks situation right now, with the expectations we had coming into the season, do you feel like they underachieving in your eye? Because us fans, we was expecting them guys to really, really do some special things, but it seems like right now they just kind of early in the season they hitting a snag. Do you think that the expectations was overwhelming for them, or you think they are where you think they would be at?
Yeah, I think that they overachieved last season, and I've written to that it was a special pandemic season with no fans. A lot of players were missing for COVID. The Knicks stayed very healthy, and the chemistry was right. And, Isaiah Thomas once told me after he departed, he said, I felt I brought in talented players, but I never got the chemistry right. And chemistry is the most important part of the NBA and is often overlooked. And they haven't established the chemistry this season with their two new players of Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Thibodeau already realized that Kemba and Randall don't really work well together, so he's banished him. And I wonder about Evan. He's not, let's be honest, Julius Randle and Reggie Bullock had a great thing going, a two-man game. Julius trusted him. He thought the world of him as a defender. They got along really well. And Julius also liked Elfrid Payton. They have the same agent, so they were close. I feel when Julius has talked recently about how everything's choppy and there's no flow, this is 3 weeks ago, I felt he was referring to the new guys like Kemba specifically, and maybe even a little about Evan. And they did have a little debate on the court before halftime in a recent game, if it was the Nets or I can't remember the game, but they did have a nice debate, and it looked a little angrier than it needed to be, quite frankly, since it was on the court. So the chemistry is not there right now, and that is why Thibodeau made his second big move, puts Nerlens Noel into the starting lineup the way it was. And as he said the other night, Noel killed it the last part of the season. So he wanted to see Noel in the starting group. And then he put Mitchell, who had been so-so. He's been okay, but nothing special. See him with the second unit. He obviously likes it because he kept him there last night, even though Noel is hurt again with a back injury. And that's another thing. Noel, once he was promoted last season, he stayed perfectly healthy. And this season, he's been in and out of the lineup, another big factor in their losing record right now. So chemistry is an issue. They have a couple of new faces. And sometimes you get the chemistry just right, and you don't want to break it up. And I'm telling you, we've reported it. Tom Thibodeau wanted to see Reggie Bullock back in the Knicks uniform, and they didn't get it done.
Yep. Yeah, and obviously Kemba Walker, there was a lot of buzz, Mark, on his homecoming. And you mentioned the Austin Rivers thing, which is I've been comparing situations similarly where Austin was, not part of the team, for very long. And the Kemba Walker situation, was an experiment. Are you surprised the fact that it's been this short of an experiment and it just didn't work out? And do you think that's having an effect on the locker room?
Yeah, I'm shocked. In fact, so we're in Atlanta and Kemba takes a rest day, which I don't think delighted Tom Thibodeau because Derrick Rose was hurt. So he was missing his top two point guards. So in Tom's eyes, Kemba probably should have sucked it up and suited up, but he didn't. And Alec Burks goes in the starting lineup. They look magnificent against Atlanta. But I wrote a follow about it. I said, maybe there's a change coming, but probably not against the Nets in the very next game. You probably think that Bronx native Kemba Walker is going to suit up in Brooklyn as the starting point guard. Didn't happen. Thibodeau pulled the plug, and he won't even put him into a game just to get his legs moving or keep him fresh or keep him sharp. I wrote in my little newsletter my 5 little observations this morning. I said, the game's a blowout for the final 15 minutes. Put Kemba Walker in there for 5 minutes and let him get some run, just in case you're going to go back to him at some point. He won't even put him in for 20 seconds. It's an indication to me that Thibodeau wants nothing to do with Kemba anymore, feels he's not a defensive player. He's never loved small guards, and he just doesn't think he fits. And I'm shocked. I mean, they have a big press conference at the Garden, on the floor of the Garden in the summer. Leon Rose is there. Tom Thibodeau is there. And it's over after 20 games. A New York legend. I don't know. He deserves better. I know he's past his prime. Maybe they're better without him completely. But I think he deserved a little more time than he got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because, when he first got here, Mark, I was delighted about that. I'm like, Kemba Walker, Bronx native, Rice High School. You already remember Cardiac Kemba in the Garden. You know what I mean? It was crazy, but I hate to see that it went this way because I do think that maybe he just don't. Maybe Ted feel like he just don't have what it takes to be a Knick from a defense standpoint. Maybe short point guard. But and me personally, I'm thinking they might be saving him until the 15th. I don't know, but I wish the best for Kemba Walker. He's a really classy guy, high character guy, real solid NBA guy. I wish the best for him, man. Because I just wish it didn't go the way it went this early in the season for him. I just think it was pretty tough to deal with.
You brought up a point that I've never written to, and it's a really smart observation. Maybe they definitely are going to trade him at some point once the December 15th marker hits, where everyone can be traded, including Kemba and Evan Fournier, and maybe they're trying to keep him healthy. maybe they don't want him to go out there and have some bad setback, and like, who's going to trade for him now? So you keep him fresh, you keep him off his legs, and maybe I have to think that some team might have some interest. It's not his contract is modest under the circumstances. 2 years, 18 million. I have to think there are a few teams who are playoff bound who would like a Kemba Walker to see what he could do.
Absolutely, Mark. And you mentioned, we're underachieving, below expectations. We have a tough stretch coming through. Golden State coming into the Garden, Milwaukee again. If the Knicks continue to slide or be inconsistent, what are you hearing, and what do you think is going to play out with this situation? Obviously, Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose have a great relationship. Scott Perry, there's rumors now that he's a candidate in Portland as well. So there is plenty to come through in this next period of weeks to come.
Yeah, listen, the Knicks were so patient last season because they loved what they were seeing on the court. Once they made the Derrick Rose trade, they didn't want to touch it. So at the trade deadline, they just basically removed some pieces they didn't need. And they had a chance to add something significant, and they never did, per Andre Drummond. So now it's a different story. Now they're underachieving. They're under 500 right now, and I think they are looking to see what pieces they could move. And let's be honest, Mitchell Robinson's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So far, he has not shown he deserves a major contract extension. And they probably think in unrestricted free agency, there's going to be one team that gives them money and that they're not going to want to give. So at some point between December 15th and the February 9th deadline, I think it is, he could be moved also. Unless Noel is just not going to get healthier, that's another risk. But Tom does like Jericho Sims a lot, talks him up a lot. And we know he has a love affair with Taj Gibson. And I feel Taj has slipped a little, I'll be honest. I think even after last season, I think he's lost a little bit of athleticism and liveliness, just a little bit. And at his age, it's a factor. And the fact is, all their centers can't shoot. And that's a big problem with them. And that's why Miles Turner has always been on the radar, a center who could shoot the three-pointer, still block shots. Mitchell Robinson, Taj Gibson, Noel, Jericho Sims. You got the worst four center shooters in the league almost. It's remarkable. So I think they love that diversity. And let's be honest, I know the fans love Obi Toppin. He can't shoot a three-pointer either. So I think the ability to bring in a big man who could shoot the three, someone not named Kristaps Porzingis, but in that mold, that would be an appealing prospect for the Knicks. And that's why this G Leaguer that I write about, and none of my colleagues will write about, this two-way player, former Spurs first-round pick, Luka Samanic. I know they're looking at next season for him, but who knows? If they start trading pieces, Luka could find a spot he's a two-way player, so he could come anytime he wants.
And I'm glad you spoke to Popovich. I think Popovich gave some great quotes on Luka.
Yeah, it's funny because my colleagues, my fellow beat writers, were busting my chops. They knew I was going to ask about Samanic when we were out in San Antonio. They knew I was going to ask Greg about it, and they thought that Popovich was going to have a nasty, snarky Popovich-esque response, but it was just the opposite. He was very flattering. Said the guy, the sky's the limit is one of the quotes he said. And he did mention he's got to stick to it and, play more defense. So there was clearly a little edge to his remarks, but they may regret it. The Spurs don't make a lot of mistakes, but they may have pulled the plug too soon. We'll see. He's not a great defensive player, and that's Thibodeau's thing. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of us guys we clamoring for that guy to come up out of the G League. Us guys as podcasters, as first and foremost fans, we see what this guy doing down in the G League. We like, man, if he can give us half of that up on a big level, you know what I mean? If you give us 30 points down there, you can give us 15 in the NBA,
Yeah.
man, that'd be amazing. I mean, hey, Wayne Selden sitting there doing nothing. Let him have Wayne Selden spot. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, even if it's 6 minutes a half, hit a 3-pointer or two and try not to be that bad on defense. I mean, that's the thing. It's like defensively, he's still not really, really good. And Thibodeau he's 6'10", and he's more of a power forward. But listen, Toppin's not a good defender either right now. I mean, but Toppin's a fan favorite, and he's not a 3-point shooter, but his fast break ability, being able to raise the tempo of this offense is a really appealing thing to Thibodeau. That's not Samanic's game. He's a 3-point shooter. He's someone said, he's like a Porzingis light is how someone described it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, we know you've got to get out of here. So we'll wrap up by saying, thanks for jumping on the Real Buzz. Appreciate you. We'll have you here anytime. But why don't you talk about your latest story and what's come through?
Yeah, well, they traveled late last night. That back-to-back with San Antonio and Indianapolis, that was brutal. I in all my years, 22 seasons, I can't remember anything that bad. I'll be honest. The time zone affected them. They got in at 4 a.m, and they looked the part as a tired team in the first half. So then they now have to fly to Canada. They flew late last night, and they have no practice today. They play in Toronto Friday, and we're waiting a word. Toronto canceled its practice because of COVID, and Indiana obviously canceled its practice as Carlisle has COVID. Let's cross our fingers they play in Toronto. But last season they did not play in Toronto. They played in Tampa Bay. They always have struggled in Toronto. That's been a great home court for the Raptors. Another weird part of the pandemic season that played in the Knicks' favor. The Knicks do not do well against the Raptors in Canada. So we'll see what happens.
Hey, Mark, before we let you get out of here, one quick question. Do you think this is a playoff team?
I think they may be a play-in team, which is 7 through 10. And that is not a playoff team. That means if you don't advance in the play-in tournament, you're in the lottery. So I am thinking that this may not be a top 6. I thought going into the season they'd be battling for the 6th seed. And now if I had to make a wager, I'd say they're 7 to 10. And let's be honest, they're not 100% locked for 10. You got 13 teams in the East who are pretty good, including Indiana. Indiana's at 13, and they kicked the Knicks' butt last night, although extenuating circumstances with the back-to-back situation.
Okay.
Yep. And if there's any other safe bet or bold prediction you'd have in terms of Kemba or the movements coming up.
Well, we mentioned December 15th. Not only Kemba is eligible to be traded, but Evan Fournier. I have written before that Scott Perry was not 100% sold on Evan Fournier over DeMar DeRozan. The Knicks knew they'd have to pay some more money to get DeRozan, and they decided for the money, Evan was a better bet. I think they had so much cap space. I think, obviously, in retrospect, they should have forked over a little more money for DeMar DeRozan. Evan could be on the block. Who knows if this continues? If there's a team that wants to give the Knicks something special, they could trade Evan Fournier. It's not working out right now. But listen, it's still early. And we got till February 9th. But I would not be shocked if by February 9th, Evan Fournier is on a different team. God.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we appreciate you coming in, man, giving us some of your time. We know you're a busy man. We know you got to get on your grind, and we do appreciate it from the Real Buzz. Thank you so much, man. It really meant a lot to us for you to come on here and support our podcast, and we're going to be forever grateful to you, man. We thank you so much for that.
Oh, guys, I had a great time, CT. Divine, you guys do a great job. I really enjoyed it.
All right, Mark. Thanks, man. Be safe out there, man. We just hopefully see you again somewhere down the line.
Yeah, definitely invite me back. I'd love to come on. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right.
Appreciate you, Mark. Yep. So, keep a lookout for the next Real Buzz pre-game, post-game coming up against Toronto. I'm CT, my co-host Divine, Nick's Real Talk. Peace.